Hi, this is our discussion post number 5, teaching philosophy reflection. Okay, so my teaching philosophy is that it is okay to make mistakes as long as we learn and grow from them because it is what makes us stronger. I came about this philosophy because growing up, my dad would always tell me that life isn't always a straight line, it becomes a zigzag. So, like, during that time, obstacles are going to come your way, but as long as you you don't give up, you will reach your full potential and you'll just be stronger. So that's just something that's always been instilled in me. And when I see students struggling in like my classrooms and then they're like, oh, like I'm in special ed, like I'm stupid, like they'll tell me that, and I'm like, you're not stupid, you just learn differently and it's okay that you're going at your own pace. Oh yeah, that's my.
I had a student one time tell me, "Oh my God, I'm so stupid," and I was like, "Hey, don't you talk about my student that way." She's like, "I'm talking about myself." Yes, and you're my student, and you're not stupid. So don't talk about my student that way. I just remember
Oh,
that. But in terms of my philosophy, I think the purpose of education is to give yourself a good foundation of it's like it's linked to your helping students discover their identity, right? Helping them kind of at least be able to reflect on who they are and know and what they want to do, what they want to be. And but there's also the thought that an individual can never understand who they are without understanding the place that they live in and the history of that place, right? And so that's why that part of education I think is important, is being able to also teach students not just make connections to who they are, but how society can affect the pressures that can change you and form you to who they are. What are some examples from history of how society has changed, what laws, what politics, what history has led to the creation of the circumstances that you're in today, right? Because as much as you have a role in where you can go, you didn't really necessarily have a role in where you were born. And there's a bunch of things that happened up to this point. And so in the journey of discovering yourself, and you have to also understand the community and the world that you live in. And so my thoughts on philosophy is that the purpose is to help create more independent adults who are able to function, and also then be able to participate in the civics that goes on in their everyday life, and even if they choose not to participate, at least understand it so they can understand the role that it all and how it all can affect them in one way or another. I put you out to sleep, sorry.
no, you're good. I was just trying to see if okay, I'll go. So, I was kind of like, okay, so the way that you guys were talking about, I wasn't sure if we were talking about like in that, like and she mentioned it, like it's something that you need to consider when you're doing interviews. And they asked, so yeah, I was confused as to like, and that was one of the questions that I asked Josue when he did the interview. He was like, yeah, I get asked like what's your teaching philosophy? And I was like, okay, I'm torn. Like, is this supposed to be like what we think? Or is this supposed to be on one of those, like when we did, what class was it?
Was it
Constructivism and all,
Yeah, but what that
and
one class that talked about like, yeah, it was that one class. Yeah.
pedagogy,
Yes.
the
Um,
pedagogy,
yeah.
that
So I
that
was
word.
like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? So I ended up coming up with the pedagogy, whatever they say, but I thought of it as the aspect of, okay, so as I was reflecting on some of the stuff, it was like, oh, it's the constructivism is kind of where I fall. Because I think that students should have social interactions and they're building on their knowledge that they already have and then engaging in active learning so that they're retaining the information. I feel like I'm a big hands-on learner, and I think a lot of our students need those visuals. So I think that that's like one of the biggest things for me. I also think that students should be able to reflect on their own work. I feel like if we're always providing feedback, they're really not knowing what. So like if they're looking at their own work and then they are reflecting on it. Excuse me. I'm in a thing. It's like I'm in school.
No
That was my
running in the
husband.
halls, mister.
That was my husband. So, but yeah, so I'm thinking like it's like a lot of the things I kind of reflect on what I think of, like how, you know, I would have liked for my classroom to be like when I was younger. And that's kind of like the perspective that I'm putting into the way I've been doing things. And then I like that students would be able to tap into their funds of knowledge. You're going to learn that in 500. Funds of knowledge is just like what they know. So like their own experiences, bringing everything in, allowing them to be motivated and willing to participate, because if you have no motivation or willingness, they're really not going to
Mhm.
learn anything. Going back to like the feedback and everything, I think that also elicits for effortful thinking, because if you're letting them reflect on their own, then they can bring more of like, oh, okay, maybe I didn't get it the way you were saying, like for them to be able to pick up on some things. And I think the biggest thing with our students, a lot of gen ed teachers do is they assume that students can't do things, so they kind of diminish a lot of what is going towards them. And I think like the biggest thing is always ensuring students like and reassuring them, like you said, like you're smart enough, you've got this. Like I think we shouldn't, like, yeah, there's a point where we modify work, but we shouldn't dumb it down the way a lot of teachers say, oh no, we have to dumb it down. Like, no, you're not dumbing anything down. You're just modifying it in a way that they get it, because what's the point of giving them something that they don't understand? They're not going to get it, or giving them something too easy that they're not going to get the bigger picture out of it.
Right, and I see that a lot when we're modifying tests for math. It's like I don't think the diverse learners are necessarily being challenged to understand the concept as well as your gen ed students, you know? And like sometimes there's a difference between cutting down the number of problems to also maybe putting in more information that wasn't there. It's just sometimes it's a little tricky to figure out when is access more limiting, right? Because it's like at the end of the day, you're trying to give them access to it, but sometimes by opening it up too much, maybe now you just change the lesson that they're getting, or maybe they're not actually learning as well as they could.
I think when it comes to that, I think especially like within like a high school setting, I know it's like I have heard students, oh well, I want to do the easier test that this student's getting. But at the same time, it's not that it's easier. It's like, yeah, we're modifying, but it's still following like the Common Core standards that we need to follow, like making sure everything's still grade level. We're just taking that like important pieces that we need as the students to make sure that they're understanding, to see if they're getting that. I forgot what we were doing with this. Sorry.
It's recording.
Pointing back with like what Susie mentioned, like, you know, do an interview, and yeah, like they asked me that. It was like it's kind of hard to answer that question in this point of time, especially in like our residency. But it's like all I with my students, I want them to kind of come in, feel respected. Everybody's, you know, kind of like what Diane says, like the positive intent, like everybody's there like to their fullest extent. Just respect, but it's like it's my teaching philosophy is still something that I'm still trying to figure out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess after a while it's gonna change. Obviously, after like we get more experience and we're like understanding our students a bit more. But yeah, definitely I would want them to feel respected, because I've seen like how some teachers want to talk to students, and it's like, you really want to argue with someone who's 12 years old and you're a full grown man? And like, let's be real right now. Like, why are you doing that? Like, just hold on. I don't know. It's just like, collect yourself, bro. You're grown. These kids are kids. Kids will always be kids, and they're always gonna have an attitude. They're not perfect.
And I understand the confusion that like Susie was mentioning, right? Is thinking the philosophy is more like your methods and how you want to teach. And I think it's both of what we said and Susie said, right? It's not just how you're going to teach, but also what you want to teach and what the point of all of this education is, right? Because I remember I had an assignment way back in the day in my undergrad when I was taking an education course that I had to write my teaching philosophy, and at that point, that professor explained it as pretty much exactly what we're doing right now. What's the purpose of education, and how do you want to transfer, or how do you want to help students gain knowledge? And so I think we're touching on all of that. And yeah, as time continues, our philosophy will change, right? Especially like all this culturally relevant stuff. I'm sure it was not in a lot of teachers' philosophy about 15 years ago, and definitely not 30 years ago. And so the purpose of education changes as those empowered start to shift their minds on what should be taught and why we're teaching in the first place.
And I think it's kind of, okay, maybe it's just the way I'm thinking about this, but I don't think that there should be a teaching philosophy, because I feel like we should be able to incorporate different things. And it shouldn't be like, oh, like it shouldn't be a question that's asked. It should, as in, what's your teaching philosophy? I think it should be as, how do you see yourself helping your students, kind of thing. Like it shouldn't be a philosophy, because one, I think for me, maybe it's too soon for us to say, oh, this is what my philosophy is, because like I know said, like it depends on our students too. So that kind of affects how we're going to teach. And I think that it shouldn't be determined as, oh, this is what I am, because I don't know what I am yet, you know. I don't know the students that I'm going to have, so I don't know how I'm going to come in with this, because I could think this is how I'm going to do it, but then I get to that point and it's nowhere near what I wanted to do. And I feel like if we're stuck in that, like you said, Sergio, like if we're stuck in that like mindset, I feel like there's no growth from somebody.
Do you think also like with the teaching philosophy, it also not like just based on like our students, but also like admin?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like the culture that the school creates, and like essentially thinking of like what's a teaching philosophy for like a school that's like JROTC, like does this switch compare to somebody that's like an NIV school or a CT school? You get me?
Yeah. I just think it's hard. I think it's hard to say like this is who I am without really knowing who I am yet. I mean, for us, it's too soon.
Yeah,
That's why
like words could just be words, and like they say, actions speak louder than words.
I think that's why for me, when they think teaching philosophy, my first thing I go to is why do we need to be educated, right? And then so what's the purpose of this education? What's the how can we use this information, put it at its best optimal use, right? So that's why for me, my teaching philosophy is to help students become those independent living people who can live as independently as possible, who are also aware of the community they live in, and also are preferably participating in their civics.
It's sorry, I just it's interesting. It's like one of those like when you tell a kid, I don't even know what class it was that it was like, or I don't even know what, I feel like everything's just a blur, everything's all together, but there was one where it was
Yes.
like, don't do the KWL, what we know, want to know, and then learn, or something like that, the KWL chart. And they were like, oh, don't use it because you're just putting it out there, and then it's up to interpretation. And I feel like that's the same for this question. Like it's up to interpretation on how you take it. Because I had to Google it and I was like, okay, what does it mean? Like, and I asked Josue, I was like, what do you mean? Like, to me, I don't know what that means. And when I looked it up, I was getting like the behaviorism, constructivism, and it was like, okay, but like it's the pedagogy, whatever. And I'm like, but like if you're telling me what teaching philosophy is, like what your teaching style is, and that's like kind of what you were saying, Sergio, what your professor had told you. And when you look it up, that's not what it's saying. So it's like you get it depends on the interpretation that you're taking this from.
But we should have asked ChatGPT, obviously.
Right? Yes, I should have gone there instead.
It's like, what's a teaching philosophy? Oh, interesting. What's my teaching philosophy?
You know what? I'm gonna do that. I'm interested in knowing what the heck it'll tell me.
All right, I'll get on there too. Let's see.
Right.
While we're getting there, any other thoughts?
No, I just think it's definitely like, yeah, like you said, definitely open to interpretation. I think it's just something that's still developing for us. I think we probably might think one way, but we probably might have a better understanding by like maybe what, year 3.
Yeah, and hopefully we don't become those bitter teachers who make assumptions that, we were just talking about in the other discussion.
So according to Chat GPT, it says it's a set of principles and beliefs about education and the process of teaching.
So it sounds like everything we've been talking about.
Yeah. But it's like, I feel like, I don't know. I just think it's, to me personally, I think it's a dumb question to ask.
Agreed.
It's a difficult question to answer. So, although they tell us to not to ask so broad questions, you gotta be more specific.
Yeah.
So, what have you guys said? I haven't gotten that question in my interviews, and none of them. So, I was surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, I have. It was right on the spot, and I was just like, "Oh crap!"
But what were you thinking when you were asked? Like,
I just thought about like the same thing I've been saying everywhere. So I was like, oh. Because it's like you gotta come up with something there and there. Because if you're like, I don't know, they're gonna look at you like, girl. So yeah, I'm just like, but yeah, that is true. Like all of this is just a learning experience, and like the books we have read, like the one with like 500, I don't know, where she talks about how like books are gonna mean anything until we get into practice. So like all of this is just like, it's just for schoolwork basically, because at the end of the day, what matters is the practice and not the homework we did, all this research. At the end of the day, we are who we are.
And our philosophies are going to probably be shaped based on how the people around us are working and what their thoughts are too, right? Because we're a community and we're going to be working in a community school. So I guess it will then ultimately depend on what the school ends up doing. But there's something about us that sticks there, right? Because if a school staff or whatever doesn't line up with how you think a school should be run, then obviously there's some difference in whatever the philosophies are there.
I think like with the philosophy, I know kind of like the first time I got asked that question, I'm not gonna lie, like yes it and try to fluff it and make it sound like unicorns and ponies. I think I got asked that question I think 3 times, Susie. I think the 3 different things I did.
Yep.
Honestly, like one of the best things that my mentor had gave me, because I was like, I don't know, like I know I want this in my classroom, like respect, positive intent. He's like, you could just literally I'm gonna be honest, it's something that's I'm still developing, but this is what I want to see, and take it or leave it type of thing. Because yeah, like I said, I don't know, like it's gonna all be based on the school, the admin, the classroom that I'm in, the resources that I have.
It's been interesting interviewing for teaching positions. It definitely doesn't feel like interviewing for any other kind of job. The expectations are different and they're looking for different things. And it's so interesting how acceptable it is to say that you're still developing on something for the most part, like, and you know, and that you're still needing to improve, which is good because in the other jobs I've interviewed for, it's been more about, oh, you gotta sell yourself. You're the expert already. And so I think that's another thing I carry into my teaching philosophy is that, you know, even me as a teacher, I'm still learning and I can learn from anybody, including my own students. And that's also something that would be important to me.
Yeah, I'm grateful, but at the same time, I'm a little saddened that I didn't get to do any interviews.
They're not fun, trust me.
I scheduled one or two just to leave the site a little early.
You know what? I was like, okay, I wanted to do it. Like, don't get me, like, I was like gung ho that I was going to interview somewhere. And then with Josue, when he told me that at his residency site, they interviewed him, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's all I need is for my principal to be like, okay, we're going to interview too. And I was like, oh, so I was like very, very anxious. And then when she gave me the position, I was so thankful. So I was like, I don't have to worry about it.
I'm looking forward to accepting an offer. So it'll be over next week, I think. Yeah.
That's exciting.
I think it's just interesting, like the way interviewing, because I feel like they develop these interview questions around like the school's philosophy and mission statement, and you're like, there's so much research I could do, Oni, and I don't know if my philosophy is gonna fit yours, but at the same time, I don't even know what my philosophy is because this is what I think it is, but maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right, I don't know.
Yep.
You know, when you mentioned that, Josue, you kind of made me make a connection and realize that a lot of those interview questions are them trying to pull parts of your teaching philosophy out, right? They're trying to see what you know and what you think and what you would do, which all is a part of our teaching philosophy. So they want to know how what you think of your job what you think your job as a diverse as a special education teacher is. They want to know what you would do in certain situations. And so they're just really poking and prodding at what our teaching philosophy is, even though we don't quite have one, because most of our experience comes from the little bit of experience we had in the last year, plus everything we read in our textbooks, right?
I think it kind of falls into like, our, like all of our pedagogy.
Pedagogy. Thanks, Sukuzi.
Whatever.
Our pedagogies are all different because, like, I remember one of the questions was like, how do you deal with this? And you're like, what are you talking about? Like, I read about this, but I haven't done it. But then going to my mentor, he's like, oh yeah, you did this, but we call it this. And it's like, oh, cool.
I had a similar situation too when they asked me, "Oh, tell me about this thing," and they gave me some sort of acronym. Don't get me started on all the acronyms in education. And I was just like, "What? That's a good question, because I don't know what it is that you're talking about." And then she's like, "Oh, well, what she was talking about ultimately when she kind of summed it up was like, oh, she's talking about identifying the behavior that the child's doing and then looking at at what happens before that, so you can figure out what the trigger is, so that your solution is to try to have an intervention at the right spot to prevent the negative behavior." But because she called it something else, I probably ended up sounding like I don't know what she was talking about, because she gave me some acronym that I'm like, huh, what is that?
Yeah, no, I feel that. Like, we talked about MTSS.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the multi-tier
Multi-tiered
support system.
Yep.
Well, my school called something else, and I'm like, oh man, I just literally said I haven't done this, and here I am.
What do they call it?
MTSS. Oh, what do they call it?
I think like back at the grounds is like student support organizer or something like that.
We call it WIN.
Win.
Win. Like,
Sounds better
win.
than.
We're gonna
Sounds
win.
better than MTSS.
Yeah.
It's called PB something.
It's called what?
PB something. I forgot.
PBIS. That's what she told me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she didn't call it PBIS. I would have recognized that when she called it PBI. She left the S out, and that's why. Yeah, you leave one out, it's like there's so many acronyms. It could be something else. It's like
Another one I don't understand is bibs. I was like, what you guys say about bibs?
Bibs?
The only reason that I know bibs is because Benji has to have a bib.
my baby has a bib too when I give her milk.
No, me too when I get chocolate wasted.
I was eating my feelings so hard yesterday. I should have had a bib on when I was eating that pint of ice cream. I was like, it's hot. Yeah, I deserve this.
No, definitely. We do have 4 minutes, y'all, just so you guys know. Any closing remarks, comments, concerns, emotional outbursts? Hold your peace.
I mean, this is just a journey for us.
It is a journey. So with that said, I'm curious what like a teacher with like several years of experience would say to this question.
It's crazy because I know like my
Don't tell us to run. All of them probably, but you better run now. You sure you want to do this? Because like a bunch of teachers are always telling me, you sure you want this? You really want this? Like, girl.
Oh boy, sounds like you didn't want this.
I've seen special ed teachers that did a special ed program years ago. I think it's so different now because I feel like, like with what we learn, like, it revolves like UDL, making sure like there's like social emotional learning. And I feel like before it was about like, I think she calls it like deficiencies.
Yeah.
So like you have these teachers that are more mindset under philosophy around that. And then you have me over here like, you, Tia.
Yeah, a lot of them is the expectation that you're supposed to, and that's how my mentor, I mean, he's not as like that long into school, but it's the mindset of you need to raise grades. Like you need to make sure that kids are, and it's like, but we're not like really teaching kids. We're teaching the IEP.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh yeah, 2 minutes, y'all.
It was
How many?
30 minutes minimum, so I'm going to talk very slowly.
In conclusion, and we summarize this conversation.
And summarize this conversation. Yeah.
The summarization of this conversation is that we are in a journey.
I think so. That's exactly what it is, though, Anan.
That is good. Just like our students, we are
Yeah.
on our own educational
we are
journey.
always evolving and learning and growing.
Ay, cálmate.
That was good. Let me write that. What was it again?
What?
Let me write that down. What was that again?
Always growing and learning. We're always evolving, growing and learning. Write that down. Quote me. If not, I'm gonna sue you for plagiarizing.
Whoa. We don't want that. Don't get me kicked out of NLU for sure. And speaking of something that was different too, I actually brought this up at my interview with my high school. I kind of brought up how cultural relevancy is much more important nowadays. And that's like because they asked me, why do I want to teach? And I was like, well, because when I was a student here, I didn't think education was important. It didn't matter because I wasn't really learning anything that I felt was of value. And that's why when I went to college, I discovered that there is information out there that I do want. And if I had received that information earlier, I might have had an appreciation for education at that time.
Yeah, and representation also matters with our teachers, like before growing up, we would always see like white teachers, which is not a bad thing, but it's just like we want more representation of like different races so like we're able to connect.
So Sergio, going back to like the pedagogy, you would actually be the essentialism, because so I'm reading because I had to have like the breakdown of these things. So it's primarily focused on teaching and mastering of core basic subjects and skills, an essential approach.
It sounds about right.
What's
that way they can.
So this is how you say it. Look at this is how you say it.
Pedagogy.
Pedagogy.
All right, I'm gonna correct the professors next time they say pedagogy. I've been hearing them
You know,
say that
that's like-
too.
It's like the data, and they go data.
Well, no, the difference between data and data is one is singular, one is plural.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But you could have said it's like tomato, tomato,
Sure.
or potato, potato. But we can
I
just call the
still-
whole thing off. We're at 30 minutes.
Can I say one more thing though before the timer? So I have actually a device training teacher who's white, and she says I have this culture
Responsive.
responsive certificate. She's like, I'm gonna be honest, it's just for white people to show us to be cultured. She's like, and I was like, oh. She's like, yeah. Like, okay, cool. But on other notes, yeah.
Shut up.
I absolutely agree, because a lot of times these lessons on cultural responsiveness is like just reminding us that our culture isn't the normal, but as minorities we know that our culture is not the norm. So a lot of times when we're teaching us this stuff, it's like
That's like
yeah.
the PD that we had. It's like they should have just taken out the bilingual people.
It's like, yes, I understand that my culture's norms are not the norms because
Yeah.
I'm a minority in another culture's norms.
And that, you know, that's funny because I was just telling my mom today about how, you know, with like the whole, you know, how like we're big on allowing kids to be called what they want to be called. And, you know, we need to be more inclusive and putting like no gender and all these things. I go, but they still discriminate Latinos because we have the accents, or not just anybody that's not English name that has accents. We can't even put that in there because it's not allowed. And it's like, you're taking that away from us, but we're promoting all this stuff, but you're excluding still.
Y'all, because y'all too lazy to figure out which alt 0518 will give you the Enya, right?
Oh, no. I'm talking about like on Google Forms and stuff, like, oh, it's not accepted. Or when you're doing like documents, it's not accepted. Because trust me, I put that in
Oh,
there.
really?
Wow.
Wow.
I think that also goes with the like Asian American people when they have to like English their name.
English.
Yes, like
Yep.
Nguyen, which is win. I didn't even know.
Yeah.
It's gonna end anytime soon.
Conclusion.
Bye,
This is it. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, that was nice. Thank y'all.
Thanks.
Bye.
I'm gonna put the video. Yeah.